Thank you, Chairman and moderators, for this opportunity to present before this esteemed audience. I shall go on to talk about ectasia, its relevance to refractive surgery, and a diagnostic challenge. We already have come to understand that keratoconus management has gone a long way, but when it comes to ectasia with refractive surgery, we still seem to be on uncharted waters. It's like unraveling a mystery, and in this context, I would like to clash the issues to the basics. And the more our understanding evolves, it's like a Pandora's box getting opened wider, and we yet are not very conclusive about this issue. The crux of the issue is when you are looking at high refractive errors, which is a challenge in corneal-based procedures. So we have understood that we should not correct more than -10 diopters of the cornea. We should be very cautious of thin corneal thicknesses and treat small refractive errors when you are correcting a thin cornea. We should be very wary of keeping off low residual beds, and I prefer to use 300 plus residual bed in all my refractive procedures. We should totally avoid small optic zones because pumping laser through a small optic zone could really trigger off ectasia. Avoid thick flaps in totality because it's a huge biomechanical compromise. And if you're able to understand that there is a low hysteresis, these are situations where you should avoid a refractive procedure and thus avoid ectasia. So it becomes critical that you are able to have better diagnostics to understand those formed first keratoconus so that you avoid yourself into getting an iatrogenic status. So refining our understanding, we've moved forward to individualized treatments, like if the cornea is less than 500, you look at surface ablations or ICLs. If it is more than 500, you look at femtolaser flaps to create thinner flaps, or a microkeratome if that's the only other option. But insist on choosing a microkeratome with a thin flap, and thus we have a variety of options. Biomechanics and hysteresis are still newer postures which are still being understood, still less defined and unquestioned. But we definitely know that if you are using a microkeratome, you are cutting more into the peripheral corneal fibers, which is biomechanically not very stable, as against a femtosecond laser flap, which has steeper side cuts and a thinner flap. We have to come to understand a little more about the viscoelasticity of the cornea, and this Corpus HT defines it by the apical deformation which occurs, and this is detected with high-speed Schleimpflug's images. And the advantage here is that if you have done a CXL, post-CXL with a Corpus, you'll find that the deformation is less, which indicates that the cornea has become stiffer, whereas in that instance, a topographic response requires more time to manifest. Again, the ocular response analyzer with its various parameters with its different acclination peaks gives us some idea about the hysteresis and the corneal resistance factor, but yet we are not conclusive. So I feel at this point of time, understanding the topomaps is most critical to unravel the clues. This is a topography which is a symmetric bow tie, but you will find that the floats are very steep. So immediately the suspicion of ectasia may come in your mind, but you look at the bar display, all the 9 parameters are within normal limits. Again, the mirror image of the other eyes is similar. But one thing you should do is, it's a 50K, so you should not use a microkeratome, but look at an infrared flap. Going to the next eye, this is an oblique astigmatism. Again, very steep floats, again a suspicion of ectasia. There is a doubtful inferior temporal thinning, but it's not very obvious. But yet, looking at the bar displays and the red flags, it's better to look at an ICL rather than a corneal procedure. Again, this is the third situation, a high myopic error, where I wouldn't suggest that we do a cornea-based procedure at all. But it looks a normal cornea. But when you look at this other eye, you notice that it's a typical pellucid marginal degeneration with the infratemporal thinning. But supposing the slit lamp had been normal, this could be actually an inferior ectasia, and in this situation, you need to look at a pachymetry map at 12 millimeters to know whether there's an infratemporal thinning, and if not, it could be just an ectasia when the management differs from a pellucid. Moving further on, this is a guy at age of 32. He has all the telltale marks of early ectasia, but this eye is okay. But in this eye, he has a -2 cilia, and he insists that this drop in vision occurred in the last couple of years or so. So even if he's at that age, I think we should not hesitate but do a CXL to more regularize his cornea. The other newer areas where ectasia is being better understood in refractive surgery is those suspicious topographies. Like if it's a very thin cornea, there are some clues in the sagittal curvature mark. It's not a clear-cut form of prostate. And in those situations, we have come up with doing a PRK extra or a LASIK extra, wherein we use Vivex extra at 0.25% and a high irradiance of 30 milliwatts per centimeter square for just about 60 seconds of exposure with riboflavin and 60 seconds of irradiance. And you can combine it with the PRK procedure, but here you shouldn't combine it with a mitomycin. A similar thing could be done with a LASIK extra, where you lift the LASIK flap, you do the treatment, place Vivex extra, close the flap up, and irradiate with a 40 milliwatts per centimeter square. These are some situations. A 468 thin cornea, this is the myopic error, but yet you have a residual wear of 347. So you're just on the borderline, do we treat or not treat? But here if you combine it with a PRK extra, it appears safe. Again, looking at the second situation, it's a 5 corneal thickness, a fairly significant myopic error, but you see this inferior steepening here, it's an asymmetric bow tie, prominent steep floats. But you feel that with the CXL, you could go ahead and do the treatment. The third situation is this, that these eye has a similar scenario, but when you look at the left eye, it gets more suspicious. But this is not the place where you would look at combining it with CSL, but go away from the cornea and do an ICL procedure. This was one of the early cases in 97, wherein everything on the upscan looked normal. The only thing was he had a steep posterior float. We went ahead and treated him with a microkeratome, and he came in 5 years later with an ectasia. So all that was possible at this point of time to do a CXL treatment and nothing beyond. So I do feel that present understanding of the topomaps seems to elucidate more and give us some refractive options. The last agenda is talking about the topo-guided PRK which is possible in early ectasia, wherein you are able to regularize the cornea and flatten all the K values on the sagittal curvature mark, not correcting the refractive error, but regularizing and making the cornea more neutral with better quality of vision. So there are two ways of going about it. You could adjust the Q value by 20-30% if the cornea is very thin, or just correct the refractive error. All this is based on the available corneal thickness, and you should manipulate the amount of ablation such that you do not ablate more than 40 microns. This is a case where this guy had a 455 cornea and inferior cone, and he just did a Q value adjustment for him, combined it with CXL, and you will notice that there's a reduction in all the higher order aberrations, and his maps became much better and the quality of vision improved. These are again two examples of inferior decentered cone, wherein only the refractive correction was combined, minimal refractive correction within 40 microns with CXL was combined. Here essentially it flattens the cone and thus improves the centration of the cone. This is the last example where a very significantly decentered cone improved with a mild topo-guided PRK treatment combined with CXL. So what we understand is that we could play around the topographic values now that we understand them a lot better. Keep in mind the relevance of hysteresis. You observe, you treat judicially, cross-link alone if that is the only option available, combine it with topo-guided PRK if it is feasible, or else go ahead and do the intacs and the toric ICLs for improving the quality of vision. I would like to conclude stating that it is still a rough and track. As far as refractive surgery is concerned, we do not have all the conclusive evidence possible. It's just the tip of the iceberg, and the answers are not completely lucid. Thank you.